We are
Yeah.
live Wednesday night.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. So as I walk here, brother, um, I just passed a sign that said "No Kings," and I don't know how much of this you get over there,
Oh, quite a
but
bit.
gotcha. Yeah. So I was just thinking on this topic, and I realized this is kind of a perfect analogy for what the ego's issues are, the
Yeah.
problems that that
I
people
was hoping
have.
you were going to go in that direction.
Mm, because essentially we created a world. Before we went live, you were talking about Amazon's policy in that if something's going to be triggering in the conversation, people need to acknowledge that beforehand. And that way it's all consensual, right?
Right.
But in a different way, we've all signed off on the reality being the way it is. And our sign off is kind of that we don't do anything to change it. Or if we
Mm-hmm.
don't do anything to change it, it's kind of like a sign off, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody was okay with the world where you had to be a billionaire or have crazy amount of power or influence to run for any sort of office. Everyone was okay with it because we knew those stakes, or we thought we knew them.
Yeah.
And then and then when someone with a lot of power gets in office, we're mad that they exhibit the type of qualities that someone who has a lot of power, especially self-made, more self-made power than not, right?
Right.
We're mad that they exhibit the qualities of somebody who has that.
Yeah, it brings me
And
right back to your analogy of like I want it to taste like it has pepper, but it doesn't have pepper, and that's been coming up more and more just in my observations lately.
yeah, and mine too. And Neville Goddard said something very similar to this in the opening of his book. He said, I've never met a criminal who's interested in being anything other than a criminal, but I've met many criminals who are interested in hearing how not to get caught while
Of
being a
course.
criminal.
Of course.
And I love this because similarly, as we go through this life and we carry our sob stories with us, and we all do, we're not really interested in hearing about how we're not a person with a story and baggage to carry. We end up only tuning our ears to hearing about how we can be a person without the suffering. We don't want to do the things or have to experience the things that in our minds are suffering. And for everybody, it's different.
Right.
But, like, let's say, mourn the loss of a parent, mourn the loss of a daughter, you know, mourn the loss of our mobility, our health, you know, our sight, our hearing. And I think this is really relevant because there's two things that are happening. The first is we're we're suffering, but the second thing is, and it happens simultaneously, is we're choosing to identify with thoughts. And these two things they mutually arise. They arise mutually, and they cannot be separated from each other. If we believe in thoughts, we're going to suffer. And the way that this tends to happen is most people judge before they experience anything. A line that comes to mind is from an artist is TV taught me how to feel. Now real life has no appeal.
That's right.
But the nature, but the nature of how that gets brought about is that we did some sort of defining winning and defining losing in our lives, and then wanted to identify as a winner. And the general way that we arise or arose at that conclusion is we kind of looked at the average and said that we would like to be better than average. So we've defined a category in our minds that doesn't exist. And this is integral to our identity and personality as an ego, is our desires and the things we want to avoid. The ego is in transit, it is in motion. The definition of the ego is where you want to go and what you want to avoid while you're doing it. But the higher part of ourselves, the quiet intuition, the still small voice, isn't so much interested in the drama and the hopes and the dreams and the aversions. The higher part of ourselves, and it is a part of ourselves, is okay to be patient. It's okay to flow. It's okay to end up below average in something because it recognizes that with all things, there's two aspects of it. There's the negative side, which we're quick to point out. And then there's the positive side, which we're very slow to acknowledge. So, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, if you lose your mobility or you're sick, let's say you're really sick for a little bit of time, when it comes back, you don't really lay your attention too much on it, but it feels really nice.
Of course.
It feels really nice to breathe. Take full, deep breaths into the belly without coughing or choking. It feels
Yeah.
really nice to be able to go up and down the stairs again without
Right.
dying, because you're not taking in much oxygen. And so, we are in a sort of perpetual state of fighting the flow or fighting what is, in that everything ends up being somewhat uneventful, in that it's normal. It's like, you might have a sob story about this happening to you and that happening to you, but that's run of the mill for a human being. Like things happen while you're thinking. John Lennon saying, life is what happens to us while we're busy making other plans. That's that's what we all kind of showed up for when we got here. And all of these things, they all are connected because the joy of being unsick is actually connected to how miserable you are when you are sick. If you're really miserable, then you're really joyful on the other end.
Right.
And that's how the experience arises. So humanity, or the egoic state of consciousness, the voice in the head, ends up being perpetually anti-life. And that's what I believe is the meaning of the term antichrist in the Bible, or at least the spiritual meaning, is that
Right.
you end up being anti-life from the inside. You're actually anti all sorts of things. And if you sort of check with your egoic consciousness, the voice in your head, you'll find that you actually have a very large list of the way that in your mind you believe things are supposed to be. And then when something comes up that throws that off, we suffer. But we suffer only in as much as we cling to the idea that it's not supposed to be like that.
Yes.
And if you let
Yes.
go, you have a very different experience.
Yeah, that delta, or like that distance between the expectations and the reality is sort of like the swing. But it can also go in the other direction, right? Like when your expectations, say conversely, are very low, and then outcomes exceed that, um, it goes in the other direction. And so you sort of have understanding this. I would say that like the next point would be to know that you're sort of um, in a sense controlling this, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, by um, where the thoughts have set the expectations.
I love that. Yeah, I can't really emphasize that enough because if we didn't set the expectations, who did?
Yeah, that is a good
um
question.
so there, in my mind, talking about these two states, let's call it person mode or pixel mode, right? Pixel mode being you're one with the whole and you experience that. You don't separate yourself from nature. You experience that, like, you came out of nature and also nature comes out of you. What do you
As
think you're doing when you're eating or having sex or being getting tired and enjoying sleeping? Like what do you
Yeah,
think that is? That's nature
of course.
expressing itself through you, you know? Um
This
so
topic, by the way, ends up being the writer's profound conclusion to his Neon Genesis show.
I'm excited to check that out. I did watch a couple episodes and I also finished part 1 and part 2 of Charlie Sheen, so hopefully we
Oh
can get
wow!
into that a little bit.
Yeah, I only did it. It took me like 2 or 3 sittings to do part one. It's pretty heavy. Hang on, there's a
Yeah,
cat.
yeah,
Oh, there we
sure.
go. There we go. Yeah, it's pretty heavy duty, pretty seemingly honest work.
It is very. I very much like that. I know. I noticed that they included a lot of different pieces of like his past. Like even if it didn't like directly tie into the story they were trying to weave, they sort of like they did their due diligence to let people share their heart, on it. I thought
Yeah, so it
so.
comes out as being more organic rather than the typical kind of uh, scripted piece.
Yeah, and that even came up in some of the interviewees, like just talking about how like I realize it's not totally like this isn't socially encouraged me speaking like this on camera, but they said, but if I don't be honest, then this just comes out to be like another like sugar coated piece of shit. And I was like, yeah, like that's very true. Like you have to pick one, right? We can either all play by the rules and only do things that is, socially encouraged, or we can be real, you know? And you could say that this Charlie Sheen picture is from the perspective of pixel mode for exactly that reason. If you want a cultivated image, if you want something that looks perfect, you're asking for a world in which everybody hides.
Right.
They're going to hide behind your projection of them, they're going to hide behind their image just to save face. If you make people feel like they need to be embarrassed about what they are. But yeah, we could talk about these two states. One, we could call it person mode and the other pixel mode. And a lot of the discussion that Sean and I have been having is chasing the latter. At different times we've called it different things. You could call it truth, God, wisdom,
Unity.
intelligence, unity, life, peace, nirvana, heaven. But I think what I wanted to share most about this is you're having a human experience. And so I don't want this conversation to turn into something that's very anti-human, but rather to show each person that they have a choice as to how they want to look at things. So because guilt in a large way is the enemy in a pretty big significant way is the enemy of truth, or an enemy of truth, you know?
Yes.
So if we're starting to feel guilty, that's just self-hatred, and that's very anti-unity, but it's also kind of it scatters you into fragments of yourself. And I don't think that's very enjoyable for anybody to be scattered and self-divided. So, you know, the idea here is that at all times, through all cultures, truth has been trying to enter into a system that has sort of done its best to promote itself. You know, like when Christianity arose, there's kind of a split between the Greeks and the Romans. Um, and the Greeks, in theory, cared about wisdom, but then they killed Socrates.
Yeah.
So they didn't care that much.
Or
They
you
didn't
could
care
say,
if someone
like in
were
the
to try to.
Bible, you might say the number one thing that the Hebrews cared about was um, the coming of a Messiah. But then a group of them also killed him. So it's this duality that is universal across all times and peoples.
Yes. And so, yeah, you have on almost a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder, you might say. And the devil is not an evil entity per se. It's the encouraging to protect identity. So all of the thoughts, in a way, are trying to help you protect your identity and separation, because that's what an identity is. An identity is where I draw a line between me and other things, and I say, this is me and that's you, because I drew a line here. So that's that. And unity, or the angel on the shoulder, the still quiet voice, the what does my wife call it? Her intuition. Um Intuition is there to protect unity. So you might say that pixel mode is being aware and staying aware of all that is together as one thing, the connectivity between all things. And then ego, or identity consciousness, is trying to be aware of the lines that we've drawn in our minds between things. I'm me, this is you, this is over here, this is you know, this is
Stay out of my swamp,
Massachusetts.
donkey.
Stay out of my swamp, donkey. This is Massachusetts, this is Vermont, this is New Hampshire, this is Connecticut. And don't get it twisted.
Right.
Don't you dare try to apply for a license over here if you're living on that side of the street. Um so it's you know, these are two perspectives. And so in the Old Testament, when God tries to implement a few life changes to the Jews, one of them is fasting, and another is to institute a day of rest. So God says, on this day, I want you to just trust that I'm going to provide for you, and I want you to do nothing. And this seems to be a big ask.
Yeah.
you wouldn't think maybe that's such an imposition, but if you looked at all the modern ways that the Jewish religion tries to keep the Sabbath, it's kind of absurd.
Yeah,
Because they
the
try to keep it, but they don't actually want to rest. They want to like get around it. They want to like
loopholes. It's all
follow
about loopholes.
all about loopholes. They want to follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. They want to
Yeah,
ignore God's meaning, but they want to keep his words, I guess, in
right.
theory.
It's
And
it's uh it's sort of like what the modern practice of law is founded on.
wow. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And so when you just look at these two practices, that they're built off of the idea that when you actually practice something, the way you do one thing will bleed into the way you do everything else. If you all of a sudden start trying to become the fastest, 100-yard dash athlete in the world, do you think that's not going to affect how you try to manage your time when you sleep or brush your teeth or study or go to work? Like, do
Of
you
course it
think
does.
that's not going to bleed over? Like if you become so single-minded on becoming a top-notch athlete, like how would that not spread to every area of your life? How would that not spread to all of your relationships, right? It
Hmm.
would, because you're one person, despite our attempts to divide ourselves an infinite number of times, um, through every thought that comes through our consciousness. But um, that's the idea here. So when it comes to the day of rest, right? This is the realization that there's two economies. There's the economy of the world, and I define economy as the way things move through our perception, right? Like the
Yeah,
motivating factor behind motion, right?
that's a
Like
really good
perceived,
definition. Yeah.
thank you, like perceived value in the transposing of time, the motivation behind movement. So you have pixel mode economy and person mode economy. You have the world's economy and you have God's economy. And these are just two ways of looking at it. In Hinduism, this is Shiva and Shakti. So Shiva, the world of Shiva is pure undiluted consciousness. And this is known in Hinduism as pure peace or pure bliss. There's no blips of pain in the world of Shiva. The state of consciousness that Shiva is advocating for or representing in Hindu culture is pure bliss, pure peace, pure unchanging. And then his wife, Shakti, is the manifested world. So it's kind of like the space in which the all the quote unquote Earth's history is happening. The space is Shiva. The manifestation is Shakti. So Shiva is never changing. Shakti is always changing.
Mm.
You know? So in pixel mode, from that perspective, if you live like that and if you quality control your thoughts and your existence towards that, you will experience more and more peace. You'll experience more and more things not ever changing. You'll experience the whole world kind of revolving around your unbiased, non-judging eyes, so to speak, where you emanate unconditional love because you feel peaceful and the world seems to emanate it back to you, but they don't do it in like ways that you would expect. Like it's not like the world changes and all of a sudden you and your mother-in-law start having the best relationship ever. Like not like that. Not where like things are changing that could be put into words, but it's more like you start to have an experience of more and more unconditional love. And if you lean your consciousness or lend your attention towards person mode or towards the changing realm, you'll experience more and more, like in the Hindu culture, Shakti is like personifying or deifying pure wisdom. But the part that humans don't so much want to hear about that is, how do you get wisdom? Pain.
Yeah.
So like, you will learn, there's a quote that says life is a harsh teacher, but boy will you learn.
No pain, no
It's like
gain.
no pain, no gain. Like, it's the changing realm, the realm of the ego, is a learning realm. And in fact, it can't end any other way other than teaching you something. The only natural ending to life is to have learned something, is to have experienced and to learn. There's no other way out of this. Like, it doesn't matter what you do or don't do, you are experiencing this. And so anyways, the idea here is that neither are bad. The Christ and the devil are they're two aspects of the same coin, because to manifest a world from God's point of view, you need to understand costs a lot, because he knows, or it knows, or she knows that it comes with suffering. And so the experience that we've had up until now is kind of like God has done everything possible to give us the best circumstances, and we, from the egoic state of consciousness, or the egoic side of ourselves, have done everything possible to ignore all of the things that we got saved from, and to hyper focus on all of the things that we feel like happened that were not ideal. So we've ignored all the quality control elements to this reality, but we want to complain about how when we went to do our experiments, everything boiled over.
Yeah.
We've ignored all the safety concerns, but we're sad, or we've ignored the whole cooking recipe, but we're sad when our chocolate chip cookies taste like biscuits. Or
Yeah, I heard someone on YouTube put it similar to that, saying that um, if in the beginning there is no physical realm, there's just unity, say like in a void, only from the retraction of the source, God, the universe, however, only from retraction of that light or that force can you materialize anything that's different. So, like you said, the sacrifice being you would have to um, pull away in order to um, introduce the content.
yeah, yeah. And the pulling away actually ends up being a perspective of pulling away, because what we find out once we start to access pixel mode more, what we find out is that the voice that seemed to be simulating the experience of separation from God, and seemed to be experiencing all these hills and valleys, that voice is very similar to the voice in a dream that animates things that seem to be happening, but it never actually intrudes on what this matrix has always shown us, which is our own mind. So by nature, when we look out, we don't see what's in front of us. We see only what we're looking at. And by nature, we're only seeing things as we are and not as they are. So we think we look out and see, oh, this person was nice to me. This person was mean to me. You know, my dad said some really hurtful things, like assuming that the hurt was directed at you. But what actually happened is the father hates himself and never had that conversation with himself. So he expresses that self hatred towards the son
Right.
in this example. So, like, this is a dream of wisdom, or sorry, let me put it this way. This is a dream of change that's happening in a place where nothing changes.
Well said.
This is a, thank you. This is a dream of learning that happens in a place of pure peace. So there seems to be two worlds, but there's only the one thing that's here, and then the individual dream that we've all had up until now. And in this dream, the dream of being a person, nothing is ever good enough. It's always falling short of our expectations somehow. When we finally get what we want here, something else pops out of place. When we finally get that piece back in, another piece falls out of the bag. And we go, oh no, shouldn't this
Yes.
screw and bolt go to something? And we
Yeah.
start frantically trying to get that piece assembled. And so rather than looking at this as a pixel mode is better than person mode, as if we're upgrading our consciousness, there's a lot more unconditional loving way to look at it, which is simply that you and I chose to experience this consciousness, and it's not our job to judge what it looks like to us. It's only our job to be here now and to choose what type of experience we would like to have. If you want an experience full of peace, you're going to have to embrace the idea that maybe this voice in the head doesn't know what it's talking about. Maybe this voice in the head isn't as knowledgeable as it seems to be.
And
Maybe this, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, and conversely, if you want drama, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet.
I love that. I love that because there's there's nothing innately bad about loving drama.
No.
It's just a choice. It's just a choice. And you can have as much as you want. And the the only person that's going to judge you in all this is you.
Right.
But you'll find that you are not so easily dealt with. You're not the lenient type of judge, the one of like the New Testament that goes like, "Hey, it's all good. You know, I'll forgive all your sins, you know. No worries." You're not going to be when you're God, when you enthrone yourself, when you enthrone the voice in your head, you're not going to find that voice preaching to you about a day of rest. You're not going to you're not going to find that voice comforting you and saying that it's washed your sins white as snow. You're going to find a domineering, jealous God. You're going to find a God that isn't interested in letting go of sins, but is very interested in hanging on to them. And in that dream, that God will be you. It all comes back down to you. because this world has never imposed itself upon you, nor told you anything worth carrying over into the next moment. But that voice in the head has told you many things that seem to be worth carrying over into the next moment. So what we're actually living is not life itself, but we're channeling the voice in our head. And those are two different things. It's going to work is different than what the voice in the head says going to work is.
Right.
And you're looking at judgment versus, I don't know, what should we call it? Like, you could call it conditional love versus unconditional love. The voice in the head hardly ever finds a person it can fully love. Hardly ever. Maybe your kid,
Mm-hmm.
maybe your kid, you finally, drop the gates and say, okay, I'll love you no matter what. But everybody else,
Another way to put it is grudges versus forgiveness.
yes, exactly. Right. So that's what's stopping us from having a very blissful, peaceful experience where we're literally embodying the wisdom of ancestors and generations and old souls and young souls and your grandfather and your dad and your sister and your brother and anybody who's ever inspired you. All one has to do to bring forth more of those qualities is just meditate on them. Just think on them. Keep your mind focused on something and they'll come through, you know? Um, so we're in a situation where the present moment is always an empty canvas, but we keep bringing paintings into the present moment and just kind of perpetually feeling bogged down by the past and the projected future. And like, this is not bad, but you could call this world interesting, or interest in fantasy, or interest in guessing, and you could call the world where you don't judge interested in truth. Because if you really get down to brass tacks and try to quality control your ego's thoughts, and you're actually serious about it, what you'll find is that you don't actually know anything for sure. It doesn't matter how many people have agreed upon it. It doesn't matter how long you've been saying it. It doesn't matter if you could call every person in your contacts list and get them to agree with you on something. It doesn't matter what the consensus is. It's simply a guess. The mind makes up stories and then asks that other people react to them as if they're true. Check.
Right. This is the unspoken social contract.
Yeah. Like the mind is inventing stories, and you could tell them 50 different ways. You could tell your stories 100 different ways. You can emphasize the negligence of your neighbor. You can, you can emphasize your own lack of diligence on your diet or workout routine or whatever. Like, you can emphasize stories however you want because you make them up.
Yeah.
You're the
Where
news anchor
where
of your own
where
life.
where do I get my news? I make it up.
I make it up. And this is just simply telling the truth.
Yeah.
If you're just honest with yourself, you make everything up. I'm making it up. Everybody's making it up. Um,
Whose line
so
is it
if
anyway?
we yes, so if we insist upon bringing our personal story, or what we believe is our personal story, into the world, and then we insist that the world make us happy, we are going to find pain. And there's nothing. Where will there be some moments of pleasure? Of course, because the worst The more unhappy you are at work, the greater high you will receive when you take your drug of choice.
Of course.
Those two things are two sides of the same coin. Whatever you think your high is, your drug of choice, that gets better the more unhappy you are during the rest of your life. Because pain and pleasure, they go hand in hand. You don't get one without the other. It's,
Right.
it's like incarnating. If you're born, you die.
Yeah.
If you're dead, it's because you were born. They don't happen exclusively. They arise at the same time or not at all. And similarly, when we interact with people, as I'm talking to Sean, the more I lean into Sean's intuitive wisdom, the wiser I think he is, the more wisdom I will be allowing in automatically. Like, as wise as I think he is, that's how much wisdom I can accept from him. In exact proportion. So if I treat him like an idiot, in my world, that's all he can ever be. Even if he's acting nothing like an idiot. Because it always takes two to tango. And this is why Jesus spoke the way he did. Believe in me and be saved. Because in your world, Jesus cares so much in that sentence to dive right into your unique situation. Because in your world, if you say Jesus is a crackpot, he's a drunkard,
Then he will be.
then he'll look like one, meaning he can do nothing for you because you've said he can't do anything for you when you call them a drunkard or a crackpot. Like, it's like that's on you. So it's like the entire world ends up being like that to you, not just Jesus, but everything. It's like if you say life's a disappointment, well, then it has to be one because you've only left space for it to be a disappointment. And so, but if you say Jesus knows what he's talking about, well, then when the ego encounters his words, they have to check themselves because, like, this is someone who actually knows, which means the ego has to be on. The
On
ego
guard.
has to. Yeah, it has to. The ego has to actually listen for a second, because all this time, this is so unconscious. But if I point to it, maybe everyone will be able to see it that listens to this. Deep down, you think you know better than everybody,
Many
and
times.
that's not a dig. You have to think like that because you got through life somehow. You see, and life has only really been violent to the ego. Your birth was very violent to you. You've dealt with lots of violence with, like, people discriminating against you or judging you or looking down on you or viewing you as less than, or physical, verbal, sexual abuse, you name it. I think the number of sexually abused women is so high. Like, I can't help but talk about that just to mention it.
Sure.
It's so high. It's unbelievably high. You know what I mean? Because this world is a world of violence, even if it's subtle violence. Like, so you and I developed this reaction to the world where we've had to say that we've known best. We had to say that we can only rely on ourselves. Like, this isn't a judgment. This is just a fact.
Right.
Somewhere deep down, you and I really feel like we know better. Everybody does. And so, like, that part of you allows you to tune out anybody you don't like. Just that one little thing, like that one little belief that we developed somewhere, maybe 1 years old or 2 years, 3 years, 5 years old, some young adaptation, some young reverting back to where we felt safe. Like humans are not that crazy, we we want to feel comforted, we want to feel loved. We've had a world that in general has not allowed us to reconcile these parts of ourselves. And so we've come up with coping skills. But one of those coping skills is you think you're smarter than everybody, including Jesus, mind you,
Mm.
and the Buddha, and Socrates,
Yep.
and Krishna, and Zoroaster, and anybody else, because there's probably many angels incarnated with us right now. But that belief that we know better allows us to silence anybody in our courtroom, just completely silence them, make a mockery of them, just call them insane, and you're an idiot, and how dare you be so insensitive to me. Like this is a big deal. Like, so just acknowledging that, like, when we have expectations of everybody else, the best that they could possibly do is meet those expectations. Like, so when we think low of other people, and like I'm mainly drawing on the fact that, like, your consciousness and mine, our person consciousness kind of says, like, oh well, I do know the future. I know what it's going to be like when I go to work. I know what it's going to be like to pay my bills next month. I know what it's going to be like to da 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 da. And it's judged a whole bunch of things, and it wants to defend these judgments very badly, actually. But when we do that, when we say things like, well, that's life, you know, life's always going to be a disappointment. When that's what happens, we should be very unsurprised because we've only left as much room for love in our relationship as much as we are willing to make room for vulnerability. That's just commenting on relationships. But, like, the love in a relationship cannot exceed the amount of room that each person opens up themselves to be loved, right? So we have this sort of voyeuristic layer on reality that says, like, no, you can love me from a distance, and that can be real and true and unconditional love. No, it can't, actually, because unless we open to love, we're never being ourselves in that relationship. So we really, like, this is just all I'm doing is commenting on the two-way nature of life and saying, if you don't open yourself up to life, for life to surprise you, then not only will it not, but it can't. If you don't open yourself up for somebody that knows more than you, or dare I say knows something, to help you, then they can't do it. You're unhelpable. The You're in hell and the door is locked, but it's locked from the inside, and in this case the lock is because you said so.
Mm.
And that's a horrible place to be, because in our normal state of forgetfulness, we don't remember, or we haven't quite quality controlled our experience to this level to have that awareness. So we actually feel like we're being tormented by reality, when all that's happening is our egoic shell is being forced to break through the challenges of life so that something beautiful can emerge. And what that beauty is remembering true beauty. So when we've grown up, we've projected all of these labels onto the outside world, and we've said, well, this is beautiful and that's beautiful, and I love it when a guy does this for a girl, or a girl does this to a guy, or whatever. This is beautiful, that's beautiful. And what we've done is we've actually, like, we've tried to override the beauty that's all around us with the beauty of labels and judgments. And we've done it unconsciously, so that we stop looking, or rather we stop seeing the beauty that's everywhere. And we say, well, things would be beautiful if this could happen, and things would be beautiful if that could happen. And this creates an experience of suffering where it's almost diabolical, because it's like it's a state of unaware suffering. You're getting exactly what you ordered, you're getting exactly what you want, but you don't know that you ordered that. And that's life, actually. Like that's the conversation that we're having with life, is we're ordering something and it's reflecting back to us what we ordered.
Right. Whether it was conscious or subconscious.
Exactly. And that's really like that's the real story of humanity, is we feel or we felt naked, and so we projected on God that he was calling us naked, and then we felt the separation. But ultimately, that unconditional love that humans yearn for, that every single one of us yearns for, requires us to be naked. And the spiritual meaning of that is to be ourselves, to be open, to be authentically you, not hiding. You're not hiding yourself. You're not hiding behind judgments or accomplishments or, you know, your strengths, your supposed strengths, what the world has told you is your strengths, that you're a good dresser or whatever. You're a good speaker, you're pretty. You're not hiding behind these false identities, but you're allowing yourself to truly be yourself. And that state of openness allows, like, essentially unconditional love for what's here, and that includes yourself, allows the world to reflect back to you unconditional love. And what that will look like is you'll be unconditionally happy. So instead of having conditions on, I can only be happy if, I can only be happy when, you'll just wake up and feel happy.
And
And
that
it
another way to describe that is freedom.
is freedom. Yes, that's another great word for this. And mind you, any of these words that we could use, they all fit the bill perfectly. They, like, because a word is just a symbol. So in Buddhism, they say Buddhism is a finger pointing to the moon. Don't mistake the finger for the moon. We're using these words to try to point to a truth that's
Right.
beyond words, and it's beyond the conscious mind, actually. It's beyond choices and being right and being wise and being the smartest and being the most winningest person or version of yourself. It's actually far beyond self help. It's self acceptance, it's self love. And with that comes self care and actual freedom. And it also comes with the world responding to you as as about as unconditionally loving as you were responding to the world. So when you open up, the world gives that back to you. And so you can sort of see, though, how humans are fighting themselves when they're split in a million different directions by media, TV, advertising campaigns, their own love of drama, their own love of their identities, their images that they project to the world as real and pretend is real, even though they know it's not. We fall in love with these masks and we forget our true face. And our true face is something that loves unconditionally, but it doesn't love unconditionally as an act. It loves unconditionally out of an expression of who it is, because it realizes that all the things that it sees outside are actually itself, just in a different form. There's consciousness, and then there's like what we build upon consciousness, which is like the personalities and the egos and the thoughts, the judgments, basically. But for those who believe in the voice in the head, that's the whole world. And for someone who overlooks that or forgives that or allows judgments to just be judgments and just be wrong all the time, the world looks totally different. And it actually looks like there's a it looks like unity, to be honest. Like it just looks like one thing. There's no lines in the sand. There's no mine and yours. There's no owning anything. And I'll give you an example. The people in this country that have too much money or power, or what you think is having too much money or power, those people are not what you think they are. They're your mind's excuse for getting the type of unhappiness it's always wanted. Should I say that one more time, Sean?
Say it one more time.
Okay. The people that we look out and see as having too much money or too much power or being the root cause of problems in this country are not what they're appearing to be. They're actually your mind's excuse for getting the unhappiness that it's always wanted.
Yeah. Because the other thing too is what you're talking about there is sort of like a practice of objectifying, not in a sexual sense, but I still think that it is a form of objectification, um, because if you were truly in that person's shoes, it would be a lot more complicated.
I love that. Do you want to reword that at all, just so we can get another vantage point on it?
Um, this is just like you said, your attention on, say, a public figure, um, it just so that it's being used as the instrument for what it is that you might be lacking. Um, Again, someone might also, in different circumstances, be looking at you like that. And so, um, again, it goes back to perception, like what you think it is versus what it is.
I love that. So, yeah, like what you said the second time there, there's there's always somebody willing to look at you and tell themselves a story about it. And from your side, you recognize that that's just a story. That's just a perspective. That's just a random projection on their part. For instance, someone who's short looks at someone who's tall and says, "Oh God, they must be so happy. Look how tall they are. I'd be so happy if I were that tall." Um, a muscular person by nature looks at someone who's skinny and goes, "Oh wow, look how skinny they are. They must be so happy. I'd be so happy if I were that skinny." So you have a bunch of people not wanting what they have and looking at what they perceive to be the good parts of things they don't have. So it's looking at the grass is greener. But in our experience, the reason why self hatred doesn't work to end up like manifesting a better life or living a better life is that wherever you go, there you always are. So that same voice that's complaining in a skinny body will then be complaining in a more muscular body if you put on 40 pounds of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no escaping this. It's like this is your demons. These are like they're almost extra material entities that can follow you around like thought forms and dreams and aspirations and judgments. They almost take on an entity outside of yourself because you're not conscious of them. And so yeah, like I don't know, if there's anything that you could share on this, Sean, but we talked about wherever you go, there you are, you know? And like kind of looking at the way that even though the mind is projecting happiness outside of itself, we're beginning as a culture and as individuals and as a race to start to realize that just because you shifted around furniture on the patio of the Titanic doesn't mean anything's gotten better. Just because you finally moved the bed into the other room like you always wanted as your apartment is burning to the ground doesn't mean that you're happier now,
Right.
because all the main problems, the foundational problems, are still there, while only the superficial problems have been dealt with. And the main problem is that we've imagined ourselves to be this voice in the head, and whatever the voice says, that could be looked at as a secondary issue, like we're a more superficial issue, because the voice in the head wants to do anything but forgive, anything other than forgive. And the voice in your head goes, yeah, I'm down, let's do that. New diet, let's do it. New job, let's do that. You know, new financial opportunities, oh yeah, I'm game. Sub to wow, yeah, let's do that. Anything you suggest to the voice is all about it.
Yeah.
Unless you say, let's forgive everything exactly as it is.
I was like, wait a
Let's just
minute.
allow everything to be exactly the way it is. And the voice
Yeah.
goes, nope, not doing that.
Anything but that.
Anything but that. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have much more than that, but I'm happy to take some no
Yeah.
problem. I'm happy to take some breaths with you, Sean, and we can kind of decide where we want to go
Of
from here
course.
if you want.
Of course.
Okay.
That was quite the opener. Um, yeah. I'm just kind of stewing on it.
Mm. Yeah. I think, oh man, it's I really liked that word that you used, freedom, you know. If we wanted to take a more unbiased look at our situation, we might ask ourselves the question, what do I need from this experience to be free? You know, what would it be like to be free of this experience here and now? And I like what Alan Watts says about this too. He says the future is a hoax because it's asinine to plan for any future moments of enjoyment for one who is unable to enjoy the present. Because by the
Yeah.
time the future gets here, it's in the moment. And now the voice in the mind is going to generate a bunch of other changes that need to be made. So, without really thinking about it, without really having been conscious, you and I and everyone listening planned for future moments. Oh, it'll be better when it goes like this. It'll be better when I approach things this way. It'll be better when I'm older. Well, it was better when I was younger because I didn't have this knee and this hip situation and these doctors telling me stuff that I don't know what to do with. It's always about distracting you from forgiveness. And I like that word in my mind because it really shines a light on the ego's core issue, which is that it just doesn't want to let things go. It really wants to drag us in to this myriad of stories. And it really wants our emotional reaction. It doesn't just want a listener, an unbiased observer. It doesn't just want to be heard. It actually wants to be reacted to. And if you look at that whole process within yourself, you'll realize that this all comes down to not wanting to let things go. And when we insist that they not be let go, that just means we'll carry that in our bodies, we'll carry it in our minds, we'll carry that poison in our hearts from relationship to relationship, from year to year, from decade to decade. You know,
So then it begs the question. It's like, you know, how do you let something go that feels like you can't?
I love this because Jordan Peterson and the gurus, in their own way, answer this the exact same way, which is that in order to bear the unbearable, something within you has to die. And I'll say this when it comes to this same process of like, how does one apply these truths? I would also say, from my own experience, in order to become something that you weren't, what you thought you were has to die. And I'm so glad that you're bringing this up, Sean, because this is such a great point. Growth only happens by necessity. So there is no boasting. Nobody who gets here to this realization or to any of these similar realizations, nobody gets here by being victorious. You get here by losing.
Well, isn't there? I'm awful at the verbatim, but there's a line in, I believe it's the New Testament, where he says, you know, something like, how can I claim that which was given, right? Um,
Yes. Yeah, it's
I
exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, what and that's kind of what
Yeah.
you're talking about, like claiming this experience when it was really just kind of necessary given
Exactly.
the
Yeah, he says
circumstances.
he's yeah, he says you know, what do you have that you have not been given? And
Yes.
if you have been given it, then why do you boast? And it's
Yeah.
such a good question because this ego is layered. You know, we almost have to at some point shed these layers one at a time. And what those words are pointing to is like, look at this layer of yourself. Look at how there's part of you that wants to boast at how you overcame this. Like, look at the part of you that's trying to assess if some book knows better than you so you can steal their ideas and brag to your friends about it. And it's like, I giggle because it's funny, but like, it's, it's me. I am that.
I think we all are to some extent.
We, yeah, like that's a part of us. So when we're able to unconditionally love ourselves, no matter what we express, that part of us can heal. Because if we really want sugar and our doctor told us no sugar, we can spend all our day dreaming about sugar. Whereas prior, maybe it wasn't even that big a deal, you know, but putting all of our attention on sugar and not being able to have sugar only encourages our love of sugar. It's like then it becomes a forbidden love. So we we play saint just so we can play villain later. And
Mm-hmm.
similarly, we play villain just so we can play saint later. Like these are the ups and downs. Like this is the drama of it all, you know. Um is like playing the victim so you can play the victor. These two identities are so connected. I love in Evan Almighty, Morgan Freeman says, if I pray for patience, do you think God, if someone prays for patience, do you think God gives them patience? Or do you think he gives them opportunities to be patient?
Mm.
if
Yeah.
if I pray for courage, do you think God gives me courage? Or do you think he gives me opportunities to be scared and overcome it with bravery? Like, it's just a question, but it really kind of shatters the ego's issue with everything, because if you look at your reality through a much less, like a more unbiased lens, you can start to see how everything's actually happening for you, not to you. And everything that happens that's more negative is allowing you to recognize what you prefer and actually experience more freedom, because until you're aware of what you don't want, how can you be aware of what you do want? And
Oh
until
yeah.
you're aware of what you want, how can you make it happen? How?
Yeah. You have to follow the process.
You have to follow the process. And at the end of the day,
Otherwise, it can only be like something external, someone else, an ad or a show or something telling you what you want. That's in the absence of the experience process. It can't
exactly.
come from within. So
Yeah, and it's not really like knowledge, Like if you just are trusting that a show said it, it's like you're just guessing, but you don't
yeah.
actually know. So you could be talked out of that position, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um and that, but like you said, trusting the process, because the process is actually essential. Without the process, we don't have anything down here. Like, wisdom is the byproduct of foolishness. That's what it is. An egoic awakening, or waking up out of ego, is a product of having suffered enough as an ego. That's all that it is. There's no
Yeah.
boasting here. It just means that you suffered enough that you're sick of dreams. You're sick of them. Had
Yeah.
enough. You're good. You're done. No, thank you. No thanks. I've had enough of this, this Twinkie or whatever. I've had
Or
enough
like yeah.
Twinkies.
Or
I've
like
I've had enough.
when I when I very quickly had like unplugged my friend's VR headset from my head. I'm like, all right, that's enough.
Yeah, like you've had enough, and this is not a better or worse situation. It's just an
It's just your
acorn or a
full.
tree.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, you're full. You're full. You're done. You're done suffering. Like you, you're you had the experience. Like you did the thing. Um, and this is just a perspective. So the reason why I'm saying all this is because the information that I'm sharing, or what we're leading to, or what we're talking about, is not another type of self-help book. Like, believe it or not, like, this has nothing to do with self-betterment. This
No.
has to do with self-acceptance, which is a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you talk about self-betterment, who gets to decide what the better version of you looks like?
You.
You can say you, yeah, it's you, but you could also say, well, it's the voice in the head, because what else would
Mm-hmm.
I have to go off of, right? So, so in this scenario, this is just the ego kicking the can down the road and saying, well, I'll try forgiveness later, after I try this other thing, which is totally going to work. You know, I'll try accepting things as they are. I'll try loving myself unconditionally, but after I lose those 20 pounds. And you know what? I don't know about you, but in my experience, the second you lose those 20 pounds, maybe the hour, let's give it the span between 1 second and 1 hour later, you're going to find something else to be unhappy about. You're going to find something else that needs improving. You're going to find something else that needs adjusting. You know, if you clean your house to the point of obsession, do you know how much a crooked picture frame will bother you? Do you know how much you know, 1 day worth of dirt in the carpet will bother you
Oh yeah.
if you've raised your level of expectation that the carpet needs to be vacuumed 8 times a day? Like if you live that life, that's a choice you can make down here. You can decide to vacuum your carpet 8 times a day. It's not even that hard. You can just, if you prioritize it, you'll just do it. It's not a big deal. But then you're shifting. Well, you're hedging your bets that the ego again will know what it's talking about, because in order to summon the motivation, you have to convince yourself that it's worth it. So you'll start telling stories about how, well, my mother always kept a clean house, and she always said, clean house, and when you're cleaning your house, you're cleaning yourself, and yada yada yada, and you'll try to get to this other place in the world where you're your ego, but you're your quote unquote better version of your ego. But then life happens, and you'll end up back where you started, and you're not any happier for it. So the question becomes, once again, what's worth doing down here? Because the voice in the head is going to tell you things need to be rearranged, but pixel mode or unity or the still quiet voice or your intuition or the realm of space and peace behind all thoughts and all experiences and all changes, the place of unchanging perspective by which you wouldn't recognize everything else was changing without it. There has to be one still point to recognize the water is moving. There has to be a rock in order
It
to
takes
see
me
that the
back
water.
to the line you shared about Einstein, the quote, either everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle. And that is to say, sort of like, uh, to answer, what's worth doing down here.
Well said. Yeah. And that's, this guy, uh, I'm blanking on his name now. But so maybe I'll just take that as a cue and not go about it this route. But I'll share that the reason why faith in anything beyond this world gains any traction at all is because this world has systematically programmed you out of wonder, out of a state of feeling like things are magical, mysterious, or miraculous. It's programmed you into a state of consecutive past quote unquote memories and future projection. And it's trying to normalize everything to convince you or coerce you that there's no miracles, that there's no free lunch, there's no day of rest. Your entire life is just toiling and pain and suffering. And there's only been suffering in the past, and there's only going to be suffering in the future. And that is a worldview that is empty of worship. So even though these religions have a lot on their resume that maybe doesn't recommend them to the normal thinking mind, there's something about this state of worshipfulness, this state of being open to receive miracles. There's something about turning water into wine. And the correlation there is that water will go rancid eventually if stored, but wine never does. It gets better and better. So water can't keep forever. wine not only keeps forever, but gets sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. And this is
Right.
actually talking about the exact same thing, which is that, like, what foundation are we building upon? Because everybody's going to do something today. Everybody's going to focus on something today and this week and this year. But if you're building on the voice in the head, you're making only superficial changes and you're keeping everything fundamentally the same. So you're going to keep
Yeah.
complaining.
That reminds me of the line where Jesus was talking about building your house on solid ground. It was like gravel or thorns or something like that. I mean, obviously it was a parable, like most of his quotes, but I think that he was talking about the same thing.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like it's building on something lasting versus building on things that don't last. You know, building your house upon a stone versus your house upon sand. And so, like, you know, and then it goes on to say that the winds and the rains are going to come anyways, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
incarnated, so now you're going to get sick and die. Like, those are the circumstances. Like, sorry. Or maybe you'll die sporadically and everyone will cry that it was an accident. I guess those are your options, you know. Um, sick and die or just die. um, that's what's going to happen. But, like, how one experiences these things is very, very different depending on where your focus is. And so when you remember yourself as a divine entity carrying as much light as Jesus or God herself, like when you remember that that is you, the ability to handle whatever comes up and the ability to love whatever comes up for what it does bring, in recognition that things are never going to go the way you think they might, in recognition that some forward motion is required down here just to exist, you know, some level of desire just to exist. And to put our desire in things that are lasting, like good, loving relationships, for instance, rather than to put our desire after that which won't make us happy, like more money or whatever, you know, more sexual conquests, more free time, more, you know, external freedoms in whatever way. It's just simply building on something that lasts, you know, versus building upon the ego, which is always changing. And I once described the ego to you as somebody who was ordering Amazon packages, but moving every single night so that their packages never get delivered to them. And
Mm-hmm.
they're sitting there wondering why God never delivers their packages. But it's them who's changing their focus. So if you observe your mind neutrally, you'll realize that your mind is always wanting to be somewhere else and it's
Oh yeah.
changing very quickly. It moves, its attention span moves. And with each movement it kind of goes, well, I just want this. I just want that. I would be happy if I could just get this in order. So it sort of like complains when it's young that it doesn't have any money and then complains when it's older that now it doesn't have any health.
Or time.
Like, yeah, or time, you know, right, exactly. And goes, oh man, you know, oh, everywhere is grass is greener type of situation. And wisdom says, well, hang on, let's take a more unbiased look at this. Rather than framing everything as around like the earth is here to make you happy, what if you just examine what's happening down here neutrally, like without framing it of like this is a disappointment or this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. And the thing is that the wisdom, the truth is actually right in front of our faces, because every time we have to interact with the opposite sex, we become aware that there's desire there, but there's also this almost metagame mentality where we're aware that the other person is projecting something on us and we play that role for them in order to get something. And there's
Right.
always this element of exchange, or what you might call like conditional love, that seems to be built into the fabric of the way that egoic society has managed itself. It's like we love our dogs, but nobody wants to be a dog. Nobody wants to trust that much. No one wants to be that vulnerable. It's like we we've sort of like we've created a simulated world that we live in where we want to be able to eat cheesecake but also judge other people who eat cheesecake. So we wish that we didn't look like we eat cheesecake, but we really want to eat cheesecake. And I
Yeah.
would argue, it's actually not the want for cheesecake or the eating of cheesecake that really makes any difference there. The difference is in wanting something that has to do with the voice in the head, because that voice is actually the misdirection of the present moment. It's telling you to overlook. And a synonym for forgiveness is overlooking. Those two mean the same thing, to overlook. That's what to forgive means as a word.
Hmm.
And we're actually already overlooking something, and we're already trusting something. So when different religious systems say, oh, trust, forgive, we don't need to try to invent ways to learn how to trust or try to increase our ability to forgive or overlook. We actually just need to reallocate that which we're trusting in. We only need to reallocate what we're overlooking and shift the focus. So when you start overlooking thoughts and the bringing of baggage from the past into the future, then you'll be able to see all the blessings. When you start trusting in what's here, what's here now, just the facts, just the reality, some might say just God. When you start trusting that, you stop trusting the voice in your head and you'll reap the benefits of that life. So, yeah, no. So, in summary, no boasting, just honesty, reallocating trust and reallocating what we're overlooking is the only spiritual practice. Another realm, or another word we could use, is a state of relaxation, a state of rest. The world promotes an economy based on work, God or truth or all that is. Nirvana promotes an economy of rest, an economy of just being, an economy of being okay with things the way they are, an economy of not fighting death, but just when it comes, meeting it as an old friend. We came into this world crying, screaming bloody murder, a lot of us, you know, and you can go out of the world like that if you want to too. But if you do, you will have missed the other side of this, which is that in order for anything to be down here, in order for anything to be manifested, there has to be space in order for things to be manifested in. There has to be a container in order to put the world in order for somebody to be complaining about world hunger and how this person shouldn't have left them. In order for any of that to take place, there had to be space opened up to contain this stuff. And so, this consciousness, or this idea of church, or this idea of truth, or this idea of leaving the workday based economy and entering in the rest day based economy, is to say, enjoy what's here and don't do anything else. Just enjoy what's here. If you're short, there's some benefits to being short. If you're tall, there's some benefits to being tall. If you're fat, there's some benefits to being fat. If you're skinny, there's some benefits to being skinny. And if you just keep trying to move, you'll spend your life running, but never getting any satisfaction. And if you rest here and now and you just trust, you just relax, you just forgive, you just overlook, you just stop being the movie and start being the screen, start being the projector, which is this blanket space of empty consciousness that you are, which simply means you don't have to roll anything over from previous moments into the present. When you stop projecting this ego, channeling or communing with this voice in your head, you just find that satisfaction is here for you automatically. And the more you are still and patient, and the less you want things, the more they just arise for you. The less you grasp after them, the more they come to you. And I'm not really smart enough to know why this is, but I just know that if you wait and you can identify what you want, the universe just brings it to you. I don't know why. I guess God is good, maybe, but that's what happens, you know? But if you keep chasing, everything seems to keep running away from you. And the only thing that I have to say about this is that some ancient cultures thought that the sleeping state was actually your waking state, and that your waking state is actually your dream state. And I
Interesting.
just and I just want to promote that as an idea of like, who says who says what's being more conscious and less conscious? Who says this is what's happening versus it's a dream? It's just a relationship between you and your thoughts.
Yeah,
That's
you're talking about
that,
relativity.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so it's like, I don't know why this happens, but the universe is a mirror, and it seems that when all of this is said and done, that you could call our entire 80 years on average down here to just be an elaborate conversation with ourselves.
Sure.
Sure. There's different aspects of you, but ultimately, if you if you love yourself, you'll find a way to have that love bleed out of you. And if you hate yourself, which, mind you, the egos always hate themselves. They hate their nose, they hate their voice, they hate their fucking skin. That the ego is precisely that which allows you to be critical of yourself to that level. It's precisely self-hatred taking some manifested form. If you hate yourself, all of life seems to bleed that hatred onto your mood, you know, onto your life circumstances. Whereas if you love yourself, the the universe seems to be like bleeding onto you all sorts of different things to enjoy. So I don't know the details of like how this could be made sense in words, but all I can say is that like this world is not what we think it is. We are not who we think we are. And life is much more of a conversation than anybody was really willing to admit. When Socrates was put to death, he was happy to die, and he was telling the poisoner to hurry up. And when the poisoner said, "You're a great guy, Socrates. Why are you wishing for death?" Socrates said, "Well, I know what life has to offer. Now I'm excited for this new adventure. Hurry the fuck up."
Yeah.
And because like Socrates was able to greet his circumstances with unconditional love, trusting that there's a reason for what's happening, trusting that he'll be taken care of. And this is a lot like the mindset of a little child. They don't worry most of the time. They trust their parents to take care of them most of the time.
They don't know what the cold beach is.
No,
They
they
just get
just
you're,
trust.
you're just getting in the car seat and you're on your way.
Yeah, and you're attached, you know, you're in a way you're free. And the world programmed you and me to believe that if we got of ourselves an identity, then we would be happy. We've been told to focus on the future for so long that we become experts in practicing anticipating the future. But the facts are that you only get good at what you practice down here. So if you don't practice peace, if you don't practice acceptance, if you don't practice gratitude, if you don't practice worship, which just means the sensual enjoyment of what is for its divine sake, you know, which is everything down here, like could be worshipped as God because it's like, you know, God comes to the hungry in the form of food. Like that's just the way it is. You
Yeah,
know,
another way of
that
defining God is just that which
which
we see to be
seem to be
good
good. Yeah, yeah, right,
in
exactly.
the
Like
simplest
whatever's
terms.
whatever's miraculous to you, that is simply the awareness that you're treating in a worshipful kind of posture and in a worshipful way this aspect of reality. Like it only is able to appear good to you if you take a worshipful posture towards it. Just like someone can only be your mentor in the amount that you're willing to take their words over your words. Like if you don't do that, they're not a mentor to you.
Right.
It doesn't matter what they say or anything. It's simply like
Credentials be damned.
yeah, credentials be damned. There is no student unless there's a teacher. There is no teacher unless there's a student. There can be no divinity unless there's a worshiper or a posture of a human heart that is open to the divinity. You know, like then arises God. You know, like God cannot come out until there's a posture that allows God to be God. You know, the goodness cannot come out until there's a posture that allows somebody to just make a fantastic sandwich on the street and you to
Mm-hmm.
pay them and you to go, thank you, God. Like for this food, like I like not in a ritualistic way, but in like a living sacrifice type of way, like God brought you this food and you're willing to trade whatever you thought was good in your identity and in the voice in your head and in your past and future. You're willing to trade all that, like your life is void for you to be able to enjoy that sandwich with that posture, like that could be called like worshipful posture, like to just be present and like in ecstasy enjoy something that's good. Like this is contrary to the ego's way of doing things because the ego is eating breakfast, but it's wondering what's for lunch. And by the time it
Mm-hmm.
gets to lunch, it's wondering what's for dinner.
Yeah.
And and maybe that seems good to you, but to some of us, that's not feasible anymore. You know, like if the world looks good to you and the voice in your head is firing and you're happy with what you're getting, stick with it by all means. You know, I'm not going to bother you. But if you're in a place where the voice in your head is stealing your sleep, it's stealing your peace, it's coming down harder and harder on your wrinkly skin or your weight or your teeth or your job or your financial circumstances or what you made of yourself or what you did or didn't accomplish in this life, and it's a slave driver in demanding more and more out of you and is more and more insistent that things aren't okay as they are, then try overlooking your opinion on what is. Just try it, you know? Try overlooking that voice in your head and just enjoying all the blessings you do have. And you will find if you do that, that in your experience, your world starts to look like an infinite number of blessings instead of where we're scanning the world for problems and more problems seem to be arising. I loved what you said years ago, Sean, about the everybody's sad when this dude shoots up, a couple of people in the hood and then shoots himself at 30. But the fact is society was okay with all of the circumstances that led up to this. So they now need to be okay with the results, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, so if you live a life where you're constantly complaining and you're constantly unhappy with what is, which is the state the voice in the head is in all the time, you just, you shouldn't be unhappy when you get the results of that. Whereas if you're someone who's able to let the voice in the head go, if you're able to let the past go, just completely let it sit without your attention, it can't live. Your stories, your problems, your thoughts, your hopes, your dreams, without your attention, they can't live. So if you're able to overlook that stuff, you're able to overlook the pain and the stories, basically, the thoughts, you know, you end up getting a whole bunch of blessings. And I don't know why that is, but it's just a feature of this realm that the mind of is a place of its own. It can make a hell out of heaven or a heaven out of hell. It just is that way, If you start focusing on all the things blocking your freedom, that will proliferate, where energy or where attention lands, experience expands. So we're only experiencing our attention. Our mind is autopiloting our attention, but you always get that which you think and feel about most of the time. So if you're focusing on lack, more and more opportunities to focus on lack appear before you. If you're focusing on blessings, or, you could call it worship or just unconditional love for the current circumstances, if you focus on that, there'll be more and more opportunities for you to unconditionally love that which is coming into your experience. And your life will become very dreamlike in the sense that miracles seem to be sprouting every direction for you. That's just what happens. You know what I mean? Like, I wish there were more words to express that, but this is just the world we live in. That which you focus on always grows, always expands in your experience.
Well said.
Yeah. So yeah, I think but if you want, I can pull up what the notes that I had on on the Charlie Sheen thing if you want.
Oh yeah, yeah. That'd be a good outro.
Okay, sounds good. Um so let me just pull it up here. Um Oh yeah, okay. So here it is. Sean Penn in part 2 says that humans excel at hypocrisy. So Sean Penn is in there, and he's talking about how Charlie Sheen became this like kind of car crash that people couldn't help but stare at type of thing.
Of
And
course.
they loved it and they hated it at the same time. So they on one hand, when it came to him and the drinking and the drugs and whatever, their arms were perpetually open to him, accepting his rants and his life and accepting of him and his choices and stuff. On one hand, they had open arms for his experience. But then on the other hand, like where there was love in some sectors for him, that quickly turned to hatred when he finally, being in the spotlight long enough, didn't do something that they liked, or his drunken rant became even more of a drunken rant, and then people were pissed. Like this is, according to the I don't I watched both the parts. I didn't know anything about Charlie Sheen going into it, so that's my perspective, just so everyone knows.
Yeah.
I really knew nothing about him at all. um but yeah, so Sean Penn was talking about how humans excel at hypocrisy. And I just made a note that I will just share here. That my note on this is what we actually excel at is cognitive dissonance. We excel at sort of like overlooking, kind of overlooking certain sides of the story, right? And this is just that idea that like we're constantly feeding off and wanting drama, but we pretend that we want a peaceful, drama-free life, for instance. So we're very much attracted to these things that make us feel like we can escape ourselves. But then we're equally met with our own self loathing about what we did while we were out of our minds. And this is the way the ego divides the self. It excels in overlooking certain aspects of the story. And that's why we could call thoughts biased opinions, and we could call, not commenting truth, because only when you're open to truth being what it is, only then can it reveal itself to you. So what I said was that the about this cognitive dissonance is that this is the nature of the mind and the origin of all problems. For all problems come from the mind. Problems are born in the mind and can only exist in the mind. And we get the appearance of problems through overlooking parts of our lives. And so when thoughts appear to you in the present moment, know that thoughts are not remembering past regrets, they are inventing past regrets. And that's a big fucking difference. When the thoughts come to you, know that they are not remembering what happened, they are inventing what happened.
Where do you get your news? I made it up.
I made it up. And we've gotten into this habit of looking up to people who are making it up in a very stylistic way. The analogy that's coming to me is Toy Story. Buzz Lightyear says he can fly. Woody says, "You can't fly, these are plastic wings." Buzz says, "But no, I can fly, watch." He does what he considers as flying. And then Woody goes, "That's not flying, that's falling with style."
And you can do that with anything.
Yes. And so, like, this is similar, like, the disagreement between these two is a similar disagreement of one person saying, "No, there are no miracles." And then someone else says, "No, everything's a miracle." Like, it's just a perspective. And so when God was once asked in a channeled interview for some advice, God says in the interview, the first thing you need to realize about advice is everybody has a bias, even me. Everybody has a perspective, even me. To ask for advice is to ask for a perspective, but you only have the vantage point that you have. So this is kind of coming back to there's no boasting again, because it just is what it is. Nothing more, nothing less. As you go about your day, there'll be many things that will try to trigger reactions out of you. There'll be many thoughts and judgments and seeming experiences that try to pit you against yourself. That, love the way cocaine makes you feel, but hate the way it does XYZ. Or you love the way this makes you feel, but you hate the way that it's just trade-offs, you know? And all we're looking at when we engage with thoughts is just points of view. And if we could overlook these points of view, we would be in heaven now. But if we can't overlook these points of view, we're going to experience hell. And it's just, that's the nature of the beast. That's the serpent. You know what I mean? Like, cry about it all you want if you feel like it's not fair, but the serpent's not here to help you.
Yeah.
Not the really, like, sorry, I don't know what else to say. Like the serpent
It's
is
here
the
for the
trap.
content.
It's here for the content, it's here for the drama, it's here for the ups and downs and the complainings and the victories. And there's a reason why Paul says don't boast. It's not because boasting is evil. It's not because boasting is not a moral thing to do. It's because you know what happens when you boast, which is self-judgment. It's the other side of self-judgment. It's self-aggrandizement. When you boast, it's like if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you're happy with the good judgments, you're going to be sad with the bad. Like,
Of course.
sorry, sweetie, that's the way it goes. If you want, like, if you want the highs of surfing and you want to stay on that wave the longest, it's going to hurt all the worse every time you fall. Sorry. Like, those two things are one and the same. Like, the master has attempted more than the master has failed more than the novice has even attempted. Like, another way to put that is everybody wants to experience what a master experiences, but very few people are willing to relax as much as a master is willing to relax. Like, the only reason why the master has peace or the therapist has perceived peace is because the person with a problem comes to them trying to roll the past into the present moment. The person who has peace isn't having it. They're not for the drama of the mind. They're not going to ride that wave. They're not going to go the ups and downs of the personal drama anymore. They've just made a choice in the present moment not to roll the past into the present. Those are the people that have peace. But from the first person perspective, that just looks like relaxing because the mind wants to get a reaction out of you. And the spirit, the higher self, is just looking forward to a day of rest because it's been pushed and bullied and gone through this hell of a ride, hell of an experience. It just wants to find some peace. It wants to find some rest. It wants to find an unconditional love. It wants to find a free lunch. And our natural minds are set up to tell us that all of those things don't exist, that God doesn't exist, miracles don't exist, free lunches don't exist, day of rest doesn't exist, unconditional love doesn't exist. And mind you, I'll just be very specific. Unconditional love means someone sticking with you no matter what happens. No matter what. Anything happens, that person still loves you. That's unconditional love. Everybody wants others to treat them like that, but it's very scary for an ego to commit to that, to commit to being the unconditional lover and not just the unconditionally loved. So that's the ego's problem. It's a perversion, it's a problem of point of view or perspective more than anything, because it wants what it doesn't. It wants the effects of something it's not willing to do. And in that division of self is all the confusion and pain of life. Like, it just, if you were willing to love everybody else unconditionally, you would see behind the illusion that unconditional love is all there is. But if you insist that conditional love is all that is, well, now we're back to the Jesus quote. Um, if your eye be single, your whole body is full of light. But if in your eye be darkness, how great is that darkness? And again, with the quote of, you clean the outside of the cup, but the inside is still dirty. If you had cleaned the inside, the outside would be clean as well. And he goes, but now you are whitewashed sepulchres. And that's a coffin. So what he's saying is you're dead inside, but on the outside, you look very beautiful. And I would argue you only have effort or energy to quality control one thing. So you can either quality control your appearance, how things look on the outside, or you can quality control what's happening inside. Like you don't have effort to do both. Either you worry about what everyone else is thinking and feeling about you, and you worry about your image, and you worry about others' perception of you at all times, how it looks on the outside, because there's always an outside game to be played. I passed a flagger today. He was pretending to be busy flagging on a dead street. I've done that job for 4 months. I know there's nothing to do. But I passed him, and this was a male on male interaction. And so they felt most comfortable ignoring me and pretending like they were busy working. This is the ego. This is the focus on external appearances instead of the focus on what's going on inside. And what's going on inside is that this whole world is like a buffet. You can pick and put on your plate whatever you want, and no one puts anything on your plate but you. But the ego is in such a cognitive dissonant state, in such a state of disarray, in such a state of unhappiness, that it puts things on its plate and then complains about them. And I'll give you this, maybe like last thing. What tarot teaches us, and all esoteric traditions are the same, they just use different symbology to share the same information. What tarot teaches us is that the way out of the death of the ego, or rather, the way out of the hell of the ego, is through the fool. Because when someone's judging, they judge that which is outside of themselves, or like that which disagrees with them, as foolishness. So the way out of the illusion is through the fool. Because while you're busy, or while I was busy judging everybody, somewhere in my vicinity, there's just a happy baker baking bread, and a happy sandwich maker making sandwiches, and a happy bricklayer laying bricks, and a happy mechanic changing tires. But the ego doesn't see them. It sees a whole world full of things that are pains in the asses. It doesn't see that there's people just like you and me who have totally escaped the illusion and just went on to enjoy their life, because the ego judges it as foolishness. Like, oh, they're a fool. They're a drunken idiot. They're just a fool. It's a way to name call so that you don't have to listen to anything that they have to say. So, this power play that the ego is making, where it's just calling everybody else idiots, but that they're hoping that its arrogance doesn't bleed through to show on the surface, so they don't get embarrassed, that they're so cocky or arrogant. This whole game of hoping that things appear fine, but they're not fine inside, is just not, it's just not a good game. And so when someone's experienced enough suffering and they withdraw their attention from this isn't, this isn't a victory for the ego. It's a letting go of the ego. It's just allowing the ego to be the ego, and to stop commenting on it constantly, to stop assessing yourself constantly, judging yourself constantly, stop remembering ways that things might have gotten misunderstood, or stop remembering ways that, you didn't get your way, or you didn't get to fully express yourself. And you just start being here now, relaxed, calm, okay, at peace, quiet, you know? And when you stop valuing wins so much, losses start to hurt less and less. And it makes it even easier to take your mind off them. And eventually, you don't identify yourself as a winner or a loser and experience the sting of those identities at all. You just experience life of a passerby. You're here for a visit, you know? Your consciousness is more patient, like Jesus. And it's not something new that enters you. It's just a part of you that you were neglecting, a part of you that was patient and not judging
He was
and
always
willing,
there.
always there and willing to be here and willing to be open. And as we've all lived our lives, we've seen glimpses of this. We've seen glimpses of letting go and relaxing for a second. We've seen glimpses of laying in each other's arms, in our lover's arms, and just not having any thoughts go through our mind. And things are just so, seem to be so peaceful and blissful. You know, it doesn't matter whatever gets you off or whatever looks magical to you. That's just a glimpse. You know, whatever even looks good to you, that's just a glimpse of the divine. And when you start opening up to everything being that same essence, when you start opening up to the fact that maybe this whole world was built for you, not to torture you, but to help you experience something, something to learn from, maybe something to observe, if you will, like a movie, for instance. When you start, you know, looking at life like that, that will allow you to loosen up, which will allow life to loosen up on you, loosen its grip, so to speak, experientially.
Nice.
Yeah.
Um, that's just about all the time that I have. Um, and what do you think? Um,
Mm. Yeah. How about
any
we just
final
do like,
thoughts?
yeah, maybe we can just do a couple of conscious breaths and like a quick grounding meditation, and then I'll close us out real quick.
Sounds good.
Okay. We're going to practice just for 1 minute in time, following our breaths. And when thoughts come, we're not going to judge anything. We're just going to let them be there and keep following our breath. Thank you for your time and your listening, guys. The more you practice this, the more you will experience peace. Even if nothing changes, you'll experience being blissfully happy. And as many minutes of the day as you're willing to just follow your breath, you'll find something to appreciate. The more you incorporate the breath into your everyday life, the more relaxed you'll find your body will be, and your mind will surely follow. So, thank you for your time, guys. We'll see you next week.
See you later. And we're out. Oops. Wait a minute. Now we're